Hey, welcome back to more reviews. Yeah, another album review, this time from another band from this year that I think are one of the ones to pay attention to, and that is Dvne from Scotland, or Dvne. With their album Etemen Ænka. If I could sum up this album and this band with like two words, it would be versatility and variety. The band have really put together a fantastic, interesting sound. It's very woven together with that sort of bassy, weaving, progressive sludge guitar that you get from the likes of early sort of Mastodon, Kylie's Neurosis and that sort of thing as well. Cult of Luna, those type of bands. And at the same time, they've also got this sort of progressive, melodic sound, which is, I think, the only band that I really have kind of compare it to would probably be the Ocean Collective. And similarly, they also have this fantastic big production, keyboard layered on top with some extra flourishes, and the vocal attack, raspy at times, but also has this ability to switch into clean as well, which I think adds an extra dimension that a lot of other bands just simply don't have. And whilst it's got the heavy as well, and it's got thumping arrangements, and it does also have that kind of sound of the guitars, which are quite, I would say, very natural in the sense that they remind of elements of the natural world, things like sunsets or the sun just dawning and that kind of thing, reminiscent of a lot of post-metal but also post-rock. Towers, the second track on this album, is a very good showcase of the harder side of the band. There's not as much clean vocals on this track, and it is well layered within the album, because the album opener, I had to check the pronunciation, Enuma Eli's very melodic. It's got a lot of clean vocals, and I think it does well for the flow of the album to have Towers, the second track, follow it as being a bit more beefy, a bit more weaving on the bass line. Evelyn May's keyboards really do add an extra dimension, just adding touches here and there just to add to a little bit more diversity, a little bit more versatility in the sound, which is really, really welcome. Given that keyboards in metal are a little bit of a, shall we say, a controversial topic amongst certain people, the guitars are very rumbly and bassy, but they also have that higher end sort of noodling thing. And again, it reminds of the Ocean Collective. The difference between that band, say, and this band is that I think this band is a lot more dynamic. I wouldn't say the clean vocals are better than the Ocean Collectives, but what they do add together is greater than the sum of the parts. And on the guitars, you get this excellent sort of groovy writing. There's a riff at about 4 minutes and 20 seconds into the third track on the album, Court of the Matriarch, and it's just impossible not to nod your head or to groove on that, and it's just so good. They cook on that riff for a little while and bring it back in and modulate on it, and a big crescendo of all these elements and keys and the vocal lines returning, reprisal and adding extra elements. On that track, that's excellent, just expert songwriting. This band really knows how to keep an idea fresh whilst also reusing it and bringing back callbacks to earlier in the song. The guitar style is really one I really love, and at times with the vocal lines that you get from the female voice on this album, particularly the vocal solo that is in Omega Severe, it almost reminds me of the vocal solo that you get on the Knife Party from Deftones on the White Pony album. Middle Eastern deserty kind of vibe to it, which I really, really liked as well. And this sort of sun-blasted kind of quality, instead of just reminding of maybe weaving wave-like, kind of almost conjures elements of sand dunes, neatly tying everything together with a sound and a production style and a theme, which I think is great. There are a few things on this album that I'm not such a big fan of here and there. There is an element at times to some of the effects on the guitar, a little bit fuzzy and a little bit jarring. I feel like it's taking some of the power out of the guitars here and there. The other thing I probably would criticize is maybe the choice to include a couple of those sort of interlude tracks, and for the most part I think they work actually pretty well. Weighing of the Heart, which has this female voice and a bit of keys and ambient elements over it, it really actually doesn't just feel like an interlude track. But the thing I would say about it is there's a bit of a gap of about maybe 30 seconds to a minute, just a bit too long, there's a bit too much there. They could have cut maybe a little bit more of that. If there's one track you should probably hear if you're not quite sold on this album, it's probably CXIV or CXIV or C14. They've released a video for it. It feels a lot shorter than the 6 minutes that it in fact is. It punches you straight away with this high-end riffing that's coming in and these guitar lines that lead into these thumpy, really blocky chord progressions. Yeah, it just encompasses everything about the band under a neat label. And I really like the way that the track that follows it, Maleka, is very well weighted with an extra bit of really good catchy melody line in the vocals, which really just smooths out that quality curve that sometimes happens where you get a really good track followed by a maybe not quite so good track, and then it doesn't make it feel like the whole album rolls like an egg. The follow-up to that as well is another atmospheric track which is called Asphodel. That has this sort of stark, very quiet female vocal line with keys that almost sound like an organ with this like long sustain on it. Different vibe from the rest of the album. It has this almost like a kind of reverent, holy quality. It creates this amazing atmosphere of introspection, thoughtfulness, a little bit of melancholy, but also a little bit of hope, and it's got that heartbreaking emotional quality. And it's on moments like that I feel this album really stands out as being different from a lot of the more generic wide field that this progressive sludge or post-metal sits within. And it leads so well into the final track, which leaves us with this absolute monstrous riff, this sort of almost like tidal waves crashing over everything. Feels just totally devastating after that quiet passage on the track before. It kind of fades out, which I was a little bit disappointed with, because I'm not a big fan of finishing albums with fade outs. I think it blunts the effect somewhat, but they do actually soften that blow by adding some more reverb, a little bit more sort of gentle guitar feedback that sounds quite ambient, a little bit of keyboard as well added onto it. It's a good close to the album, and overall this is a fantastic release. As I said, there were a few things that I wasn't such a big fan of. I think that the album could have done to have some of that dead air that was in some of those interlude tracks cut out. Dryden, for example, I feel maybe breaks the flow of the album a little bit. It doesn't feel like it needs to be as long as it is. And aside from like some issues a little bit with a couple of the guitar tone choices on a certain passages in a couple of songs, I think this album is definitely one of the better ones of the year. Well produced, well put together, really diverse sound. I don't think it tries to straddle too many sort of subgenres. I think it actually creates its own style pretty well, so it doesn't feel like it's just a bunch of other subgenres clustered together under one sound. Dvne's Etemen Ænka, I'm giving this album 7.5 out of 10. One of the better albums from this year, I think. Well above average, good to great album, and yeah, check it out. Thanks so much for watching this review of Etemen Ænka by Dvne. If you want to see more of me, I'm on Instagram on the information that will be popping up on the screen when I edit this. Stay tuned for more reviews, subscribe, like, and all that bullshit if you want to see more. Thanks.